Welcome to the Data World Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We have the session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, data mining, MPP stuff, cloud computing, and so on. And yeah, all questions are allowed. You can use the chat here in the client to raise a live question, or you can use the Q&A function if you want. You can also raise your hand, you get voice, or you use a form where I show you the link to the form after today's session, and that's where you can submit a question essentially. And if we receive multiple questions, I will be cherry picking. We have a couple of questions still on the backlog, but if you have any questions, just shoot them, right? So the more we have, the better, the more choice I have. And it's a time box question. It should be time boxed. The answer should be time boxed. So in 10 minutes roughly, it would be nice to have an answer essentially. And if there would be no questions at all, I will talk about my personal MVP cluster in our basement here. Longer story, didn't have much time to work on this. So it's glad you're asking questions essentially, because I would be pens down. Can't tell you much about it at the moment. It's looking nice. That's the only thing. All right. So we received a question. Let me just share it with you guys. And that's a real-time question here. Let me just move some stuff. Okay. So yeah, let me just read it out and then we discuss it. So how to build efficient data model for data that are some kind of event. So I know from the background of this question, it's real-time messages that they receive. We have a huge application that is made of independent modules, and each module generates logs, events that are specific for this module. On the top of each module, events, there's a layer with some common, on the top of each module events, there's a layer with some common event data, which means that they have some specific structure for each type of module, but there is some common structure as well. So on top of the message, essentially. All right, so currently our input consists of 3 data sets described below, with the outlook for the next data sets from other modules to be loaded. They have one data set events with common event information. That's the header for the common structure. Then there's an event ID involved. Then a data set mobile info with detailed information about mobile device data that's triggered event, and data sets investment wallet with the information about customer investments that is populated on a different level of granularity. So they got multiple rows per event that's in this data set. And they expect millions of rows in the events data set every day. So how do we model this? And then they sent us 2 options. Yeah. So the first option would be to use a non-historized link for the events, the header essentially. And then because the mobile info, the second data set, was on the same granularity. So for every event, you also, well, there might be mobile events, and from every mobile event, you also have an event message or event record. So it's just a satellite in this scenario, a satellite attached to the events non-historized link. For the investment wallet, you had multiple records per event. So that's a multi-actor satellite in this case, where they can attach multiple rows to the event essentially, capturing the different granularity. That's their idea. Or the alternative would be to create 3 independent non-historized links. Just capture them as events. And then the argument was, well, what about the hub? Because there's a hub for event. And we have the event ID here, here, and here. But on purpose, they left this out. Because they said, well, because they're receiving millions of events every day, this hub would contain nothing. It's just a hub with millions of rows every day. And it would stick in between here somewhere. And it would just consume storage, essentially. So they said, well, they're just adding the business keys here. That's it. Let's start with this one. So first of all, what's the best choice? What's the best model of those 2? Honestly, I don't know. That's what it is. I just don't know. Because it depends. And there's many factors which I don't know, right? So how is this data being consumed downstream? Do you want to apply business logic? Are there changes to these records, which I doubt? But I don't know it for sure. By my assumption, it's real-time data, so I wouldn't expect any changes on these records. If there would be, that would completely change might completely change my recommendation here. But my assumption is it's non-historized, no changes at all. That's at least my assumption. But I don't know how it's being used, how it's being loaded. It sounds like the data comes in via some table, some entity, not in real time. That also might impact my decision and so on, right? So I don't know. So what I want to do today is I want to share my thoughts on both options, essentially. Let's start with the second option. Naturally, if it's real-time data, especially if it arrives in real time, that's how I would most probably model this. Because in real time, you're capturing messages, and messages are just like events. And the non-hysterized link is made for capturing events, messages, transactions, and so on. So for me, that sounds like a non-hysterized link from the onset. For the event ID here, I agree. The thing is, well, it depends. Would I have a hub for the event ID or not? That depends a bit on the structure of the event ID. If this is an integer value, it's a fixed length attribute, 8 bytes, for example. Yeah, sounds good the way they modeled this. Because the thing is this, what people sometimes get confused by is when they have a model like this and they wonder how they join this because there's no link in between, or in this case, there's a missing hub. The hub is not there. So they're like, well, how do I join? Well, you have the event IDs. Why don't you just join on the event IDs, right? That works, actually. So you don't need to have a hub in between to join two data vault entities. Same is true when you have, let's say, some business key. You left the business key in the satellite. Like you have employees and they have corporate cars, but you don't care for the VIN number because you have no description. So you keep the VIN number in the satellite of the employee. That's the corporate car they're driving. And then you have some other satellite where there's also some warranty data on the VIN numbers or something, right? So there's no link because it's in two satellites. And I had once a project where they got confused. How do we link this? Because we have to go all the way via the hub to a couple of links into the satellite of the other data. And I was like, no, you have the VIN number in both cases. Just join on the VIN number and you're done, right? Problem solved. You don't need, I mean, the data vault optimizes your query patterns to some extent, but you don't have to use it. You just use the data as it is. That's number one. So that works. Now, when would I create a hub, and when might I leave this in the non-hysterized link the way this is presented here? If the event ID is a fixed length attribute, an integer value, for example, you could go for this. The problem is if it's a variable string, varchar, and the event ID has a different size or different structure and so on, then the join will become imperformant, at least on traditional database like SQL Server, for example, Oracle and so on, Postgres database and so on. So that would be the primary definition. Or the other reason is when you want to describe the event ID with some more descriptive data from some other systems, right? When it's really a business key that identifies one of your business objects, that also leads to a hub because I need to describe it, and that's why it must be external to the link. But if it's just the identifier for the message, for the event or something, like a message ID from a message topic or something, you could just leave it there and still join, right? So that works. So fixed lengths, I tend to do this one here, or at least in this case, not in a general, it's not a general answer here, right? So I would do this. If it's a variable length field, I would rather pay the price for the hub. Why? Because I'm not using it. The hub might be there for the events, but I can still join on the hash keys from this hash key here to this hash key here. I don't need to join the hub for that, right? So yeah, it fills up with millions of rows, but who cares, right? So I don't need the hub for joining between two links. But having a hash key here means it's fixed lengths again, right? So those are the my thoughts about the event ID here having in a link structure. And we refer to this one here as a transaction ID in the non-hysterized link definition. There is typically something in there, transaction ID, picture ID, maybe a flight date, that extends the hash keys of your hub references to get a unique alternate key for every record of the incoming granularity. That's what you have to have. And that's the case here for the event ID. All right, so that model might be my first shot, most probably, especially if I'm dealing with real-time data. Right, and then if you have a performance problem on the way downstream, you could, let's say you want to, you always have to join from the investment wallet to the event data for your header data. And that might be imperformant, especially on large volume of data, which they clearly have. In this case, you might want to consider a bridge table downstream, right? So that depends a bit on your join performance and so on. Pre-join everything in the bridge table, populate the denormalized data essentially, right? On the invoice wallets granularity potentially, I don't know, depends on the target. But then you're done with that. That's the basic idea. All right. Option number 2 has also some advantages and disadvantages. The so first of all, especially if you're capturing changes, if let's say the source data might change over time, then a satellite can capture those changes much easier, right? On the second option, we could introduce technical counter transactions, which we discussed in the training, in bootcamp training, to capture changes as well. The name non-historized is a bit confusing. Not the link is non-historized, but the data itself should be not changing. It's like events, it flies by essentially. But there might be systems where this type of data changes as well. Longer story. So this one would capture changes, especially in the mobile info and investment wallet data much easier, but it also leads to grain issues. So at the moment, if there's no change, let's assume that, then you have one record here and one record here, which is nice for joining. While you have a 1-to-m problem here already, could work out. Again, if you have a points issue, you could also have a bridge table afterwards again, right? So it's a silver bullet here. But as soon as you have changes in there, you have a grain issue, because then you have one or more deltas in here for every event in here. Or, well, yeah, that's number one. If it's a mobile info, if it's a mobile info message, essentially, right? Otherwise, you have no deltas here, but the deltas here, I believe. So the setup would be easier to capture deltas, but you will have some issues with the number of deltas, and you only need the last one, the latest delta in many cases for your event. And that means that you have to reduce the records to the latest event from mobile info, essentially, for your event. So they have to reduce the joins, the data set on the right side, right? That's the issue. Again, performance-wise, you could use a pit table, would be the natural solution here. Maybe, I'm not sure, because you're loading here millions of rows in here. And my assumption is you want to analyze this as facts downstream. So I would most probably go for a bridge table again. Bridge tables are optimized for delivering facts, not dimension records, while pit tables are typically used for delivering dimension records. So it depends a bit. I believe events would turn into a fact entity. So yeah, both designs will be valid. Which one is the better? My assumption is this one here, actually, but I don't want to rule this out because I don't know all your requirements. Yeah, that's what I would say. The other thing is, for the primary key here, I wouldn't use the ISIN number. Let me just double check this. So first of all, it's a non-historized link that in theory doesn't allow any changes. So this satellite here is not a standard satellite. This is what we call a non-historized satellite, where you remove the load date from the primary key. There's no change allowed anyway. So there's only one delta, one record here for every or some of the records here. Same game here. What they've done is they removed the load date from the primary key, which makes sense. Because again, they only want to allow one group of records for one event. Now, which is an indicator they don't expect any changes, right? It's real-time data. But then I don't trust the source system. So I don't trust the source system to deliver for every event here the ISIN only once. What if it delivers, even it should, I agree, it should not. But what if it delivers multiple ISINs for the same event? Then this would have a primary key violation, right? And that's caused by an external factor. So I want to make sure that your code always works, even in the unexpected case that something goes wrong in the source system. So I would not use a descriptive field or a business key like this in the primary key of a multi-actor satellite. I would just use some number. Typically, what we use is the subsequence from staging, and you could introduce something like this in real time. Honestly, just have a sequence generator here. That's it. Yeah, because the hash key identifies the group. The sequence is only used to distinguish the different deltas to make sure you can capture them for the same group. And that's it. And the ISIN goes into the payload. That's what I would most probably do. And you could also question, and it would also be an indicator for the other solution. If the ISIN number is a business key, you would like to hub it out typically, to have your own hub for the ISIN number. And then I would, again, tend to this one here, because here I could add the ISIN number as a hub reference again. And that's not a high volume, right? So you have multiple events for the same ISINs all the time. So that would be in the hub. And that would also be an indicator for using this model over the previous model, essentially. All right. So those are my thoughts on this. The other thing is, one last comment. Let's say you're not, because there was an indicator in the question that you're expecting more events like this. Let's say 10. You could go like this, have 10 non-historous links. What about 250 or 1,000 different modules sending you messages? I don't want to model this. What about this? There's a common structure. You have always an event ID. You always have some metadata from the message topic, for example. So there's some common structure of attributes you have. And everything else, you just dump as a JSON string into the event link. You just have one link for capturing all kinds of different messages. I'm not saying that's what I would do. It depends a bit, to be honest. But if I'm dealing with hundreds or thousands of different messages, I might do this because I want to model 1,000 non-historous links. Well, I would do this. For 1,000 different types of messages, I would most probably create a one link only and capturing all these different messages as these different message structures as a JSON string inside the non-historous link itself. And then when you want to consume the data, you then filter for the messages, and you have an event type, for example, so you can quickly filter for a common structure, all for the event type of, let's say, mobile info. Then you know the JSON for all these records that you just filtered for have a common structure. You always have the mobile attributes, right? So that's the idea. And yeah, and then you use the JSON functionalities of your database to consume the data from the JSON message. So that I'm using this depending on the target platform. Let's say Snowflake is great for JSON processing, SQL Server these days, Oracle, but Postgres databases are also great. So depends a bit on the database platform and on the number of different messages you have. Or in some cases, we have customers where they're dealing with no clear structure anymore. So every message might be different. And we have the same case internally as well. From the business process automation, we also receive all kinds of different messages, and there's so many different structures. It's not worth it anymore to have so many links anymore. And they come in the same topic. Also an indicator. If everything is sent via one topic, if you go data-driven, we don't apply any conditional logic. We don't split the messages in a topic. We just dump it into the same link. So a couple of thoughts. Sorry for that. But that's my 2 cents essentially. All right, cool. If you have a question like this, use this form here, https://sfr.ee/dbfriday. That's where you can submit your question, and then I use your input to prepare a couple of slides like this one today. And also check out our other webinars on scalefree.to/webinars. That's where you find a monthly webinar for Warescape and one for DBT at the moment. And if you have more questions that can't wait until next Friday, or you want to get some other opinions from other Scalefree guys, and the Data Ignition guys, check out the Data Innovators Exchange. They just changed the name, so I'm struggling a bit, but that's why essentially it's a community, forum-style community where you can ask questions, and our people, essentially, and from Ignition Data from Australia, they answer your questions, essentially. And let me just double-check this. Okay. All right, so I just read the chat here. There's no changes on the records. It's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for joining. Have a nice weekend and see you hopefully next Friday. Don't go all to the Innovators community, right? So come here as well again.